and welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. We are reviewing The Fall Guy. There's something really satisfying about this title, the new Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt film, insofar as it's really cool because stuntmen fall and stuntwomen fall. The Fall Guy, so he's a fall guy, he falls, but is also then the one that's made to be the fall guy for a crime. And so Fall Guy has double meanings. Okay, so this is The Fall Guy. This is a film directed by David Leitch. He of Bullet Train and also the John Wick movies. A former stunt performer, coordinator himself, now a director. So it's directed by David Leitch. It stars, as I say, Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt. You could argue this is a Barbenheimer moment. Two of the constituent DNA attributes of two of last year's biggest cinematic episodes or events brought together in one place. Almost like the splitting of the atom, but really the fusing of two atoms. And these are the fusing of two atomic stars. And so we've got Ryan Gosling. Obviously, we all now know him as Ken from Barbie. And we've got Emily Blunt, who we also know from Oppenheimer, playing Cillian Murphy's wife. But also she's, well known now from A Quiet Place. She was Mary Poppins. She crops up in a lot of stuff. They're ably supported with a supporting cast of Aaron Taylor-Johnson. I don't think I need to go back over what I feel about Aaron Taylor-Johnson, but we've got Aaron Taylor-Johnson in there. We've got Hannah Waddingham in there, who's a big fan favourite. I'm sure there's lots of you now going, we love Hannah. And don't get me wrong, we absolutely loved her telling that paparazzi guy to go stuff it and fuck himself when he said show a bit of leg. We've also got Winston Duke in there, and Stephanie Hsu is in there too. And so what is this? This is a remake or a revisit or a reimagining of the 1970s. Was it 1970s? Was it 1980s? I think it was 1970s TV series The Fall Guy, starring Lee Majors, who was also the Bionic Man. And I'm pretty certain somewhere in this movie I heard the of the Bionic Man. Possibly at the moment that Lee Majors had a cameo, which I have to confess I completely missed throughout this film. So this is a film set within the worlds of stunts and stuntmen. It's not parked back in the 70s, though it's clearly, riffing on a 70s series. And Ryan Gosling plays the Fall Guy. He is the stuntman. And the principal idea behind this is he's a stuntman, and due to an injury, a sort of career-changing or career-halting injury that we witnessed at the beginning of the film. I'm going to talk about the opening shot in a minute. He is then brought back into the film business, but in order to essentially solve a crime and get to the heart of why a major star in the form of Aaron Taylor-Johnson has gone missing, and therein lies a sort of double-crossing, intriguing, thriller-esque, action-packed romp of mistaken identity and trying to frame the Fall Guy, who is Ryan Gosling. So, in terms of plot, it's pretty standard fare. I mean, not much more elaborate than almost the weekly episodes we got used to in Miami Vice, which is kind of cool because within the film, he plays the stuntman that Ryan Gosling plays, used to be a stuntman on Miami Vice. So you even have the Miami Vice music in there. So this film goes to great lengths to try and riff on those nostalgic little buzz terms. Now, at the heart of this is, and set up right at the front, is the idea that there is a romance, that there is a connection between Emily Blunt and who's a camera operator, but has now been sort of promoted to director, and between her and between Ryan Gosling, the stuntman. And there's a romance, and it's kind of on set, and all those wonderful things like what happens on location stays on location. So this is a film set within the film industry, and I love films set within the film industry. But let's talk about stuntmen and stunt women for a minute, or stunt people. I'd be lying if I said that I find the whole stunt thing exciting. Don't get me wrong, when a good stunt happens, I think it's fantastic, but it's one of those aspects of a film that I don't want, or I'm not enamoured with, or amazed by what's happened in terms of allowing that stunt to happen. I mean, of course, I recognise that these men and women do incredibly dangerous things. They throw themselves out windows, they roll cars, they fall back off things, and they're there. They're body doubles, they're doubling up for people, and they're incredibly brave, and they're the unsung heroes. And apparently, by all accounts, most stunt men and women really ache. They have aches and pains that never leave them. It's a dangerous job, and we often hear stories, well, not often, but every now and then we hear stories of how, stunts go wrong. So the idea is that Aaron Taylor-Johnson, the star of this film, has gone missing. He's gone rogue, even though, Hannah Waddingham, who's the agent of Aaron Taylor-Johnson and the producer of the film, she's the Machiavellian character at the heart of all of this, who essentially tries to drag, basically, Ryan Gosling back into the business. She charms him with the allure and the bait of, you could get back with Emily Blunt. And then once he's been brought back into the industry, she can then frame him to essentially be the fall guy for something that Aaron Taylor-Johnson, spoiler alert, has done wrong, which is why he's kind of gone missing, because he hasn't actually been kidnapped, if you see what I mean. And so what you've got in here is, I suppose what you could describe this as is, or what it endeavours to be or tries to be, is a screwball comedy. But screwball... screwball comedy or romantic comedy demands a real sort of frisson of believability between the two leads, and they're both really nice. I mean, you can feel Ryan Gosling's nice guy just oozing on screen and off screen. Emily Blunt is just a straight up nice person too, but they're almost both of them are too nice, and yes, they clinch each other and they kiss each other, and there are a few kind of little flirty moments, but I didn't buy into, and I didn't have it sold to me that they were kind of in this kind of, that there was this intense kind of connection between the two of them, and this film really does kind of ask you to get on board with that. My problem with this film really kind of is best summarised, like when you do Whose Line Is It Anyway, or charades, and you go, I'm going to do the whole film rather than all the individual words. The first shot is, maybe it's not the first shot, but it could be literally, it's not necessarily the first shot, but the first big sort of set piece shot, which is essentially the scene in which Ryan Gosling gets rigged up, he's talking to all the members of the crew, it's a continuous shot, continuous take, looks very elaborate, moves around, tracks, pans, tilts, we follow him, he goes into a lift, he's talking to Emily Blunt, he goes into the lift, gets to the top, when he's at the top, they harness him up, and he falls back, and this is the accident, or this is the stunt that he's doing, out of which the accident kind of essentially ends his career. My problem with this scene was it was so transparently and obviously green screened. The whole walkthrough into the lift, you could see the edging around people's heads. Now, in a film about stunts, this matters, because I thought, well, hang on a minute. This is a film about stunts. This is about a stunt man. Presumably, one of the things we're going to get in this film is some pretty damn good stunts. And don't get me wrong, you do get good, you get stunts. I don't know if you get good stunts, but you get stunts. But I really felt the hand of the CGI too early, and so I felt that with this opening scene, which was quite clearly CGI'd all the way through, right down to they've green screened Emily Blunt being in the background of him in the lift as he's going up and talking, then he gets harnessed and then he falls down. I also felt that so many of the other scenes in this film, where there were so many stunt scenes, there was some kind of, what's the word, workmanlike kind of fight scenes. But I have to say, there were better fight scenes in that weird film with Michael Fassbender, The Assassin, was it? And there were some much better fight scenes in, say, Monkey Man, inventive, much more visceral, much more physical, where you felt the impact. This was almost like the stunt scenes or the scenes of violence within the real world of this film and not in the films that were being made in this film. It was almost like the real fights were as stunty. So you saw the kind of the miss and the thwack and the kind of pretense of it all, but I don't think you were meant to. And so for saying this was a film made by stuntmen, about stuntmen, for stuntmen with stunts, I thought the stunts were remarkably insipid and unimpressive and anticlimactic and not particularly impressive. I have to say, the director, David Leitch, he made Bullet Train, and that film had what I call, not quite literally, tickets on itself. In fact, it had return tickets on itself, thinking it was much smarter, cleverer, sassier, wittier than I really thought it was. I think everyone making that film was kind of preening, they were self-preening and kind of going, oh God, aren't we good? This is such a cracking film. Don't get me wrong, there were great moments in it, but I didn't think it was brilliant. It was all right. It just wasn't brilliant. Now, I went in to see this film at the end of very late on a Friday night. It was after a very emotional day. I wanted to turn off. I actually saw this film at the IMAX, and nothing about the way it was shot even lent itself particularly to the IMAX. I wasn't getting moments where you went, wow, this could only have happened in IMAX. It wasn't like it didn't utilise the size and scope in a way that was particularly unique to IMAX, but it was nice. I just like seeing any film on a huge screen. That's why I sit right at the front of the cinema. So the scratch, I just said to someone today when I saw Love Lies Bleeding, I said, front row, and they said, really? I said, yeah, it makes every film like IMAX. I want it all to be like IMAX. So anyway, this first scene, which felt entirely green screened, that neutered my ability to get on board with, okay, we're going to see some art. I kind of wanted a film in which we had a little bit more Because really the story is pretty straightforward. As I say, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, actor's gone. Hannah Waddingham, producer's got Ryan Gosling back on the film, using the kind of idea that, knowing that him and Emily Blunt are kind of going to get romantically involved, she wants to use Ryan Gosling as a kind of fall guy to kind of take the heat for a terrible thing that's happened, courtesy of Aaron Taylor-Johnson being an absolute sort of, hedonistic A-lister, Hollywood-style A-lister. Now, brief note on Aaron Taylor-Johnson when he is in the film. I do think actually this is probably one of the performances of his that I've liked the most, because he plays a sort of Matthew McConaughey light. But even in this, I felt he could have taken it a step further. And with all the comic aspects of this film, and it tries to be a screwball action comedy type thing, it was never funny enough. The comedy was limited. They had many moments where they tried to sort of trigger or ignite a kind of running gag or theme. And one of them, which, I'm going to like, is Ryan Gosling always wants a coffee. So when all the shit is breaking out everywhere, even when people are hurling themselves around an interior, he goes to the coffee machine and makes himself a coffee. That kind of worked a bit, but then that kind of didn't work a bit. There was a French dog in there. I loved it. There was one line that Ryan Gosling gave to the dog when the car was flying through the air and he's like, hold your core in. That was nice. But again, the dog only went for people's balls, but it went for people's balls in a really kind of 1970s way, but I don't think it was intentionally meant to be 1970s. Taylor-Johnson as Matthew McConaughey, he just needed to he was at number 8. I felt he could have dialed it up to number 11 even. There's one moment where he's actually doing one scene where he was in the film and then he was being convinced to shoot another scene, and it was good the way he was kind of like, do you think that naivety of the actor kind of trusting that the director's vision is all? And then I hate to say it for any Hannah Waddingham fans out there, I don't necessarily think Hannah Waddingham did anything wrong. I think she was just directed in this fashion. It was like musical theatre actress was in a film, and I just felt she banged it to the back of the theatre, or the back, what's it called, the back of the auditorium, the back row, the circle. And she didn't need to. I felt she was sort of almost gurning. She was sort of woefully overacting, and I don't think that was her fault. I think she was told to do that, because I think the problem with this film is tonally. It didn't know if it was a retro romp that was meant to be a bit stylistic, or if it was a sort of screwball comedy, which it tried to be. I was feeling at times that this needed the treatment, or the same treatment that Tropic Thunder did with the kind of idea of making a Vietnam film. Do you know what I mean? Great comedy. This is obviously a mainstream film, but I think it needed to be riskier, it needed to be edgier, it needed to be a bit cooler, and I do wonder whether actually Ryan Gosling, we've hit peak Ryan Gosling comedy chops, because there weren't many moments in this film. And in fact, I noticed that in the trailer, there were a couple of gags in the trailer that I thought were quite funny, when he was talking to the guy when the window comes down the copper and he says about the ice cream. They weren't in the film. They weren't even in the film. They've got gags in the trailer that didn't make the film. And so it was devoid of kind of comic lines. And I just think it needed stronger comic actors. Emily Blunt, for me, has gone weird. There's a veneer, or a sort of, I don't know if her face she just seems inexpressive, and it seems quite one note, and I wasn't getting any light and shade from her, and I didn't really fully buy into the believability of her being part of the filmmaking process, even though, of course, she's a majorly successful actress, so she'd know what those people are like. It wasn't believable in a weird way. And so even for that idea of it being a film about filmmaking, I didn't get enough from the filmmaking. I could have done with more. I could have done with more about what it meant to be a stuntman, and more about, some of the tricks. You could have had more incidental reveals of tricks that were going on in filmmaking. They tried some gags where, like, the pyrotechnics and the explosions were going off too soon, but it was all it was too self-consciously staged. So Emily Blunt wasn't very funny. Hannah Waddingham, way too overbearing. It was like it was a bit panto. I use that as a line, it's a bit panto. It wasn't particularly revealing about the movie business. Winston Duke was in there, we love Winston Duke. He was kind of thrown away. He was sort of stunt coordinator or a stunt supporter. I have to say, though, a couple of moments which I really enjoyed. I think the best moment for me was his interaction with the drug dealer when he goes out clubbing. He clearly imbibes some drugs, is hallucinating on shrooms or ket or whatever it is. It all goes a bit fucking haywire, and he can't stop seeing a fucking unicorn everywhere. That was funny. I have to say, if you put this alongside scenes like Pedro Pascal in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, drug scenes and films are always brilliant. Watching our stars kind of just go for it. It's kind of like you can go anywhere, and I liked that. I thought that was witty. The details of Aaron Taylor-Johnson's Matthew McConaughey McConaughey A-list Hollywood star having post-it notes all over his accommodation, his flat. I thought that was wonderful too. You know, he had one post-it note even saying things like, why is Chinese chicken orange? And just lots of sort of self-motivating kind of post-it notes everywhere. I thought that was quite a nice touch too. But at the end of the day, this felt like a remarkably unstunt. It was very unstunty, and the set pieces were obvious, and the storytelling was obvious. And just when you thought we'd kind of got to the end, I looked at my watch and I thought, oh no, we've got the whole fucking final third act to come, where they frame him. You know, you had boats flying over things. I wouldn't have minded all of this if what they were trying to go for was a 70s retro feel, but it was parked fully in the modern age. I mean, they were dealing with AI, they were dealing with deep faking, and that's how they were framing Ryan Gosling as the fall guy for this crime. You know, it was very much parked in the modern day era of filmmaking and mobile phones and tech and monitoring and all this kind of stuff. So it didn't marry that there was this kind of strangely dated approach to all of the stunts. And I'm surprised because, as I say, David Leitch they're stunt people. This film is made by stunt people. And I just thought I felt there needs to be the Tropic Thunder film, comic film of the stunt sort of world. But I felt, in a weird way, this film got trapped or kind of hijacked by its need in some way to reference out to the 70s kind of heritage of the TV series, which it didn't need to. Just make a different film with a different title. Don't call it The Fall Guy. Set it in the stunt world and be free. Be free to do what you want to do and get rude. There was not a rude moment in this. There really wasn't. There were just a lot of cliches, a lot of really bad cliches. And actually, as the film went on, it became more and more predictable and less engaging and incredibly drab and dull. So if I was to give it, it's a very uninvigorating action thriller, certainly not enough of a screwball comedy. It even takes a swipe at people who like films like Dune, and you could argue, well, at least they could make films a little bit slicker. Fabulous drug-taking sequence. What would I give this? I hate to say it, give this 40 out of 100. Anyway, if you've seen it, tell me what you think. Share your thoughts below.